The wind screamed like a living creature, hurling ice and snow across the darkened street as Christmas lights flickered helplessly against the raging storm. Alara stumbled out of the front door, her breath catching in her throat as the icy air sliced through her thin sweater. She hadn't even had time to grab her coat. Ryan had shoved her so quickly, so violently, that she was still trying to understand what had happened. One moment she had begged him to talk to her, to stay home for Christmas Eve, to care about their unborn child. The next, his cold eyes had narrowed, and he had ordered her to leave, blaming her for ruining his life with a pregnancy he never wanted. The door slammed behind her, locking her out not just of the house but the life she once believed was built on love. Her hands cradled her swollen belly as if her touch alone could shield her baby from the brutal cold. The snow clung to her eyelashes, turning her vision blurry while panic tightened her chest. Every step felt heavier, the cold slicing through her skin as though trying to freeze her from the inside out. She whispered to the little life inside her, apologizing for failing to protect them, begging them to hold on. Her legs trembled, her breath grew shallow, and she could feel her body weakening with terrifying speed. Christmas Eve had always meant warmth and family, but tonight it felt like a cruel reminder of how easily everything could be taken away. Miles away, in a mansion hidden behind towering pine trees and layers of untouched snow, Gabriel Hale sat alone in front of a dimly lit fireplace. The flames danced gently, but they couldn't warm the ache in his chest. He held a worn photograph of his late wife, the woman whose laughter once filled these walls and whose absence now echoed through every silent room. Christmas had become a season he avoided, a time that magnified his grief until he could barely breathe. The storm outside roared, rattling the windows, but it remained background noise to the heaviness inside him. Yet something in that storm felt different tonight, a pressure, a pull he couldn't explain. His gaze drifted toward the window where snow whipped violently against the glass. It felt as though the night itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. He had no way of knowing that at this very moment, a desperate woman was struggling toward his estate, guided only by the faint hope of survival. No way of knowing that the blizzard carrying her toward him would change both their lives forever, intertwining two broken hearts in the most unexpected Christmas miracle. It hadn't always been this way. There was a time when Ryan used to look at Alara as if she were the center of his world, a time when his hands were warm when they held hers, when he whispered promises about forever and swore he wanted a family someday. But everything shifted the moment she told him she was pregnant. At first, she thought he was simply shocked, that he needed time to process the news. Instead, the distance began immediately, small at first, then growing like a shadow that swallowed their home. He stopped coming to doctor's appointments. He began staying out late, offering vague excuses that never made sense. His smiles grew rare, his touches colder, and he flinched every time she rested his hand on her belly. Alara tried to ignore the gnawing fear inside her, tried to tell herself that pregnancy was hard for both parents. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. It became undeniable the day she picked up his phone while cleaning and a message lit up the screen. "I wish I could spend Christmas with you instead. She's suffocating me." The text was accompanied by a heart emoji. Alara's chest tightened as she scrolled through the thread, weeks of messages between Ryan and a woman she had never heard of. Words dripping with passion and desire. Plans he never made with her. Complaints about her pregnancy, about her emotions, about how he felt trapped. Each sentence felt like a blade carving into her heart. When Ryan came home that evening, she confronted him with shaking hands and tear-filled eyes. He didn't deny it. He didn't even look guilty. Instead, he sighed heavily, as if she were the burden. "Alara, you need to stop making everything dramatic. This," he gestured vaguely at her belly, "wasn't part of the plan. You knew that." She tried to argue, to remind him of the countless times he had said he wanted children, but he brushed her off with a cold shrug. "I was talking about the future, our future. Not this accident." The words stung more than the betrayal itself. For weeks, tension simmered between them, each conversation turning into a fight. She cried alone at night, clinging to the hope that the man she loved still existed somewhere beneath the bitterness. But on Christmas Eve, everything shattered. They argued again, harder than ever before. Ryan's voice rose, cruel and sharp, accusing her of ruining his life, of trapping him, of forcing him into a responsibility he never asked for. She stood trembling, begging him to stop, begging him to remember that this was their child. But his eyes remained icy. Then, in a burst of rage, he yanked the door open. "If you want to stay here so badly, stay out there until you learn your place." Before she could even process his words, he shoved her out into the freezing night, slamming the door with finality. Her heart broke in that instant, not just because he pushed her into the storm, but because she finally understood the truth. The man she loved was gone, and he had no intention of coming back. The moment the door slammed behind her, the storm swallowed Alara whole. Snow slapped her cheeks, stinging like shards of glass. The wind howled with a fury that made her flinch, pushing her back as if determined to knock her to the ground. She wrapped her arms around her belly, trying to shield her unborn child from the merciless cold. Each breath she took burned her lungs, and the frozen air seemed to settle deep into her bones. She tried to walk, but the snowdrifts reached halfway up her legs, slowing her steps until every movement felt like wading through wet cement. Her thin sweater clung to her skin, already soaked, offering no protection from the brutal night. Her vision began to blur as darkness crept in around the edges. The streetlights were barely visible through the blizzard, flickering like dying candles. She forced herself forward, whispering to her baby, "Hold on, please hold on." The fear that settled in her chest grew heavier with every step. She wasn't only fighting for her own life, she was fighting for the tiny heart beating inside her, depending on her to survive. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen, so sudden and intense that she gasped and stumbled. When the next wave of pain tightened around her belly, she realized with a spike of terror that she was having contractions. Too early. Too dangerous. Too cold. Her breaths came faster, turning to sobs before dissolving into the wind. She looked around desperately, trying to find any sign of shelter, a house, a shed, anything with a roof. But every shadow looked the same, swallowed by the swirling snow. Her legs felt numb, her fingers stiffening as she clutched her belly. Another contraction hit, stronger this time, forcing her to bend forward, gripping a snow-covered fence for support. Her tears froze on her cheeks before they could fall. "Not here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, not like this." Her mind flashed through memories she wasn't ready to lose, her mother's gentle hands, the laughter she used to share with Ryan before everything changed, the first time she heard her baby's heartbeat. The thought that she might die out here, that her child might never take a breath, ripped through her like a knife. She forced her feet to keep moving even though she could no longer feel them. Then, through the blinding storm, she saw a faint outline, tall iron gates, partially buried under snow. Hope flickered weakly inside her. She followed the path, dragging her heavy feet, clutching onto the gate for balance. Beyond it, she saw lights glowing softly from a large estate, almost hidden behind towering pines. It looked like salvation, like a miracle dropped into the heart of the blizzard. Her body had reached its limit. As she took her final step forward, her knees buckled. She crumpled onto the snowy ground right outside Gabriel Hale's estate, whispering a fragile apology to her baby. The world faded into white, the storm roaring as if determined to claim her. Then everything went silent as she surrendered to the cold. Gabriel Hale had grown used to silence, so much so that it had become a second skin. His mansion, once filled with laughter, warmth, and the soft humming of his wife as she moved through their home, now stood as a hollow monument to everything he had lost. 2 years had passed since the accident that stole her from him, yet the grief clung to him like frost that refused to melt. He avoided holidays, avoided social gatherings, avoided the world altogether. Christmas used to be her favorite season. Now it was a reminder of the empty space beside him, a wound that reopened every December. Tonight was no different. He sat beside the fireplace, the flames crackling softly as he stared into them without truly seeing. A silver locket lay in his palm, the last gift she ever gave him. He opened it, revealing their picture inside, both smiling as if life would always be that bright. His jaw tightened. Even breathing felt like a betrayal some days, a reminder that he continued to live while she did not. His staff respected his boundaries, keeping their distance unless he called for them. Most days, he roamed the mansion like a ghost, doing his best to avoid memories that lurked behind every corner. Outside, the blizzard raged with relentless force, the wind slamming against the windows hard enough to shake them. Gabriel barely acknowledged it. Storms came and went, nothing could touch him anymore, not really. Or so he believed. As he closed the locket and slipped it back into his pocket, a faint sound echoed through the hallway, a dull, barely audible thud. He dismissed it at first, assuming it was just the storm throwing something against the door. But then it came again. A soft, fragile sound, almost like a plea. He frowned. No one should be out in weather like this. And yet, something in him, an instinct he thought had died with his wife, stirred. A pull, a strange tightening in his chest that urged him to move. He hesitated, arguing silently with himself. He wasn't ready to deal with anything, not even a stranger seeking shelter. But the sound came once more, weaker this time, barely more than a whisper against the roaring wind. Without fully understanding why, Gabriel rose from his chair and walked toward the front door. Each step felt strangely significant, as if he were being guided by something beyond logic. When he finally reached the massive wooden doors, he paused, the cold air seeping through the edges. The storm's howl grew louder when he unlatched the lock and pulled the door open. What he saw made his heart drop. A young woman lay crumpled in the snow, her body trembling, her face pale and wet with frozen tears. Her arms were wrapped around her pregnant belly as if shielding it from the world. She looked impossibly fragile, as if the storm might swallow her whole at any moment. For the first time in years, Gabriel felt something pierce through the numbness, a jolt of fear, urgency, protectiveness. Without thinking, he rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside her. As he gathered her limp form into his arms, he realized his grieving heart, long dormant, had awoken in that single, life-altering moment. Gabriel carried her inside with a desperation he didn't recognize in himself. The warmth of the mansion hit her icy skin immediately, but she remained limp in his arms. He called out to his staff, voice sharper than it had been in months, ordering blankets, hot water, anything that could help. Then he dialed his private doctor with trembling fingers, barely able to keep the fear out of his voice as he explained the situation. He placed her gently on the long leather sofa near the fireplace, then knelt beside her, rubbing her arms, trying to coax warmth back into her frail body. Her lips were blue, her breath shallow and uneven. For a moment, a terrifying thought seized him. What if he had opened the door a minute later? What if she had died alone in the snow outside his home? The idea unsettled him more than it should have. As he draped another blanket over her, he felt a strange tug in his chest. He hadn't cared this deeply for anyone in years, hadn't allowed himself to feel anything beyond the muted ache of grief. But seeing this woman fighting for her life, seeing her clutching her unborn child even unconscious, stirred something raw inside him. When the doctor arrived and examined her, Gabriel hovered nearby, pacing, asking questions, unable to stand still. The doctor reassured him that she would recover with warmth, rest, and care. Still, Gabriel remained at her side long after everyone else left. When she finally stirred, her eyes blinking slowly open, panic filled them instantly. She tried to sit up, clutching her belly, her breath sharp with fear. Gabriel raised his hands gently, speaking in a calm voice he hadn't used in so long. He explained where she was, how he found her, how she was safe. She stared at him, confusion and exhaustion clouding her expression, but something in his steady presence soothed her. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was barely above a whisper as she thanked him. Gabriel shook his head and simply told her that no one deserved to be left out in a storm like that. It was the first real conversation they shared, tentative but sincere, and somehow, trust began to form in the quiet space between them. It took time before Alara found the strength to explain what had happened. Sitting wrapped in blankets, her hands trembling slightly, she told Gabriel everything, how Ryan had changed, how he resented the pregnancy, how his affairs slowly poisoned their marriage, and finally, how he had pushed her out of the house into the freezing night. As she spoke, Gabriel's expression hardened, not in anger at her but in a cold, controlled fury toward the man who had abandoned her. His jaw tightened with every detail, and his hands curled into fists at the thought of someone treating a pregnant woman so cruelly. He took a long breath before telling her firmly that she was safe now, that no one, not even her husband, would harm her under his roof. Alara's eyes shimmered with tears at his words. She wasn't used to being protected anymore. She had forgotten what safety felt like. But Gabriel, despite his grief and his self-imposed isolation, radiated a strength that made her believe him. Meanwhile, miles away, Ryan realized Alara was gone and panic struck, not because he feared for her life, but because of the consequences. If anyone found out he had thrown his pregnant wife into a blizzard, the backlash would destroy his reputation and his relationship with the woman he was cheating with. He began searching frantically, not out of love, but out of fear of exposure. Gabriel had no idea Ryan was coming. But he did know one thing with absolute certainty: whoever had hurt the woman resting under his roof would answer for it, because for the first time in years, he felt something worth protecting. The days that followed felt strangely gentle compared to the nightmare Alara had escaped. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside Gabriel's mansion, she found a peace she hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Gabriel made sure she rested, checking on her more than he intended to, always under the pretense of making sure she was warm enough or had eaten. But deep down he knew he was drawn to her quiet strength, to the way she endured everything she had been through while still protecting her unborn child with fierce love. Alara noticed things about him too. She noticed how his staff adored him, how they spoke to him with respect and affection rather than fear. She saw the way he always thanked them, always softened his tone when addressing them, even though he carried a loneliness in his eyes that never fully disappeared. One morning, she wandered into the hallway and found him staring at a framed photograph on the wall, a woman with warm eyes and a radiant smile. His late wife. There was tenderness in Gabriel's gaze, but also pain, the kind that left scars no one else could see. When he realized Alara was watching, he didn't hide his grief. He simply nodded gently, as if telling her she didn't have to pretend not to notice. And somehow, that honesty made her trust him even more. When Gabriel spoke to her belly, something inside Alara melted. The first time he did it, he knelt beside her with a soft smile and said, "We're going to take good care of your mother, little one." His voice was gentle, thoughtful, and so completely different from the dismissive coldness Ryan had treated her with. She had forgotten what it felt like to be cherished, to be spoken to with tenderness. Gabriel's presence filled the empty spaces inside her that fear and betrayal had hollowed out. He refused to let her feel like a burden. He went through the mansion personally, preparing a room for her, one with soft lighting, thick blankets, and a comfortable bed because she needed warmth and rest more than anything. He asked a staff member to bring new maternity clothes, warm robes, thick socks, and even a pair of soft slippers because he noticed she kept rubbing her cold feet under the blankets. His attentiveness wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, thoughtful, and steady, exactly what her fragile heart needed. Sometimes they talked for hours, about her dreams for her child, about his late wife, about the loneliness they both understood too well. Other times they shared comfortable silence, Gabriel reading by the fireplace while Alara rested nearby. Healing didn't happen all at once, but every day, the heaviness in her chest loosened a little. And every day, Gabriel found himself looking forward to seeing her smile, even if she didn't realize she smiled at all. Neither of them spoke about the growing warmth between them, that invisible thread pulling their hearts closer. But they felt it, the beginning of a bond neither expected, born in the heart of a storm and strengthened by the simple, quiet kindness they shared. The peace Alara had found within Gabriel's mansion shattered the moment the heavy iron gates clanged open. She was resting in the sitting room, wrapped in a warm blanket, when the staff rushed in, whispering urgently that an aggressive man was demanding to see her. Her heart froze. She didn't need to ask who it was. The storm outside may have weakened, but another storm, one she feared far more, had arrived at her door. Ryan. Gabriel reached the foyer before she did. Ryan stood inside, snow dripping from his coat, his expression twisted in anger rather than concern. He didn't look like a man searching for his missing pregnant wife, he looked like someone furious that his property had been taken. The moment his gaze landed on Gabriel, he sneered. Where is she? I know she's here. You think you can hide my wife from me? Gabriel's voice was low, calm, and dangerously steady. Your wife. You threw her into a blizzard. You lost any right to call her yours the moment you did that. Ryan stepped forward, but Gabriel moved faster, placing himself directly between Ryan and the hallway behind him. The sheer difference in their presence was undeniable. Gabriel stood tall, composed, and unwavering, while Ryan's eyes flickered with frustration at his inability to intimidate him. You don't understand, Ryan snapped. She's emotional, she exaggerates everything. She ran out. She collapsed unconscious on my doorstep, Gabriel cut in sharply. Tell me again how she ran out. His voice echoed through the mansion, cool as steel. Elara stood at the end of the hallway, trembling but not stepping back. This time, she wasn't alone. This time, she had someone willing to stand with her. Gabriel glanced over his shoulder, silently offering support without saying a word. It gave her courage, courage she didn't know she still had. Ryan's eyes widened when he saw her. He started toward her, raising his voice dramatically, as if trying to play the role of a worried husband. Elara. Thank God. I've been looking everywhere for you. She flinched but did not move toward him. Stop lying, Ryan, she said, her voice soft but steady. You didn't look for me. You only came because you're scared of what people will think. His charming facade cracked instantly. You're being ridiculous, he snapped. Come home. We can talk. You're embarrassing both of us standing here like this. Gabriel stepped forward, blocking Ryan again. She's not going anywhere with you. Ryan scoffed. You think you can keep her? She's my wife. Legally, she belongs with me. Elara's hands clenched at her sides. I don't belong to you, she said, louder this time. Her voice trembled with emotion, but not fear. Release. You threw me away. You left me and our baby to die. Ryan's eyes hardened. You're making this a bigger deal than it is. No, Gabriel said sharply. She's stating facts. Ryan glared at him. Stay out of this. You don't know anything about us. I know enough, Gabriel replied, his voice dangerously calm. I know she almost died because of you. I know she's safer here than she ever was with you. For the first time, Ryan looked genuinely nervous. He wasn't used to losing control. He wasn't used to someone stronger, smarter, and infinitely more honorable standing in his way. You can't keep her here, Ryan hissed. I'll call the police. Gabriel stepped closer, eyes cold. Call whoever you want. I have security cameras showing exactly what state she was in when I found her. If the police come, they won't be taking her, they'll be taking you. Ryan's face drained of color. He hadn't expected that. Elara took a deep breath, her voice steady. Go home, Ryan. Whatever we had is over. I'm not afraid of you anymore. Gabriel remained beside her, a silent wall of protection, while Ryan glared between them, fury in his eyes but defeat settling in. He turned abruptly and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. As the echo faded, Elara sagged with relief. Gabriel gently touched her shoulder, his voice soft now. You were brave. She looked up at him, heart aching with gratitude. I wasn't alone this time, she whispered. And in that moment, the bond between them strengthened, no longer fragile, but forged in the fire of confrontation and the fierce protectiveness he had shown her. The tension in the mansion had been building quietly over days, but it reached a peak one snowy evening when Elara's discomfort turned into sharp, relentless pain. She doubled over, clutching her belly, her breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. Gabriel, who had been preparing a warm drink for her, dropped everything the instant he realized what was happening. Elara, he said, his voice calm but urgent, it's time. The baby, she's coming. Elara's eyes widened in fear, but the sight of Gabriel kneeling beside her, taking her hand firmly in his, offered her a strange comfort. His touch was steady, grounding, a lifeline through the storm raging both outside and within her body. The private doctor arrived quickly, setting up the delivery area in the safe room Gabriel had prepared. He guided her through each contraction with careful instructions, encouraging her, praising her strength, and never letting go of her hand. Gabriel's presence was constant, quietly reassuring, silently absorbing her pain, and transferring it into protective energy that seemed to fill the room with warmth. The labor was long, exhausting, and at times frightening. Alara's body shook, sweat mixing with tears as she pushed through wave after wave of pain. Gabriel never left her side. He whispered her name softly, reminded her of how strong she was, and stroked her hair back from her damp face. At moments, he caught her eye and offered a smile that seemed to say, "You're not alone. I'm here." That simple affirmation, repeated over and over, carried her through the worst of the labor. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the doctor announced the first cries of a newborn baby. Relief and joy flooded the room. Gabriel leaned forward as the tiny, wriggling form was placed in his hands. He gazed down at the baby girl, her skin soft and pink, her small fists curling instinctively. For the first time since losing his wife, Gabriel felt a deep, serene peace settle over him, a sense that life, in all its fragility and beauty, could still offer hope. Alara, exhausted but smiling through her tears, looked at Gabriel as he carefully handed the baby to her. She saw in him the gentle, patient father he could be. His eyes, filled with reverence and tenderness, reflected an unspoken promise that he would protect and cherish both mother and child. As she held her daughter for the first time, the warmth of the room, the safety of the mansion, and the unwavering presence of Gabriel combined to create a Christmas miracle neither of them would ever forget. In that quiet, snow-filled night, surrounded by love and safety, a new life began, not only for the baby but for the bond forming between them. Weeks passed, and life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm for Alara and her daughter. The mansion, once a place of silence and memories of loss, had become a home filled with quiet laughter and warmth. News reached them that Ryan had faced the consequences of his cruel actions. Legal proceedings revealed the truth of his neglect and endangerment, and he was reprimanded and publicly exposed, not because Gabriel sought vengeance, but because justice demanded it. Alara felt a strange relief knowing that he could no longer threaten her or her child. The weight of fear and uncertainty that had clung to her for months finally began to lift. Gabriel, ever protective and thoughtful, made it clear that Alara and her baby were welcome to stay permanently. He offered them a home, not out of pity, but out of a desire to provide safety and comfort for the first time in their lives. Alara accepted, her heart swelling with gratitude and relief. She began to notice the subtle ways Gabriel made the mansion theirs, soft rugs in the hallways for her daughter's tiny feet, a nursery filled with warm light and gentle toys, and quiet evenings by the fire where they could talk, laugh, and simply exist without fear. Slowly, walls built from heartbreak began to crumble, replaced by trust and love. As the next Christmas approached, the mansion was decorated not with the hollow formality Gabriel had once known, but with joy. Alara carefully hung ornaments on the tree, each one a symbol of hope and new beginnings, while their baby gurgled and giggled, reaching out for the twinkling lights. Gabriel watched them from the doorway, holding the little one in his arms. He felt a warmth he hadn't known in years, a gentle gratitude that washed over him like sunlight after a long storm. In that moment, he whispered a silent thank you to the blizzard that had brought Alara to his doorstep, to the storm that had rewritten their lives in the most extraordinary way. Alara caught his gaze and smiled, the weight of past trauma replaced by trust and affection. She knew, without a doubt, that she hadn't simply survived the cruelty of Ryan or the harshness of fate. She had found a love built on safety, respect, and genuine care, love that nurtured rather than punished. With Gabriel by her side, she understood that the darkest nights could lead to the brightest dawns. The three of them, mother, child, and guardian, stood together beneath the glow of the Christmas tree, their shadows dancing softly against the walls. Laughter filled the once empty mansion, and for the first time in years, each heartbeat resonated with hope, love, and the promise of a future where they belonged wholly, unconditionally, and forever.